Today on CodeDependent, we're going to take a look at some new behavior for transitions that are in Flex 4. So if we run this application, this is the default behavior for transitions and the only behavior that we had for transitions prior to Flex 4. If we want to move this button from up here to down there, and then in the other state transition, we're going to move it from down there to up there, then it behaves essentially like this. So we go from state to state, moves down there, moves back up. Fairly boring. And then if we stop it in the middle, if we want to actually toggle states, check out what's happened. So it starts moving, and then we change the state, and it pops to the end location and starts animating from there. And this is automatic behavior in transitions that accounts for the fact that you can't really run both animations at one time, right? If you're running in one direction, and then you start a new animation that's supposed to run in reverse, well, you don't want these animations fighting and clobbering the position of the button. So instead, it's good practice in general to stop an animation that's operating on one object and then start a new animation with the new information you gave it. However, there's a simplifying assumption where we said, okay, well, if they're running from here to there, then we're going to end this animation, which doesn't simply stop it where it is, but it actually snaps it to the end position, and then we will run the new state transition from that new position. We have all the information we need to get from state B to state A, so let's just go ahead and pop the thing into state B to begin with. So the way that works in code, we can take a look at it. We have this button defined that says, okay, I'm at this X and Y location by default, and then in state 2, I'm at this other X and Y location. And then the animation for the transition is defined here, where we have a simple move that says I'm going to target the button, I'm going to last for 1,500 milliseconds, and I'm going to pick up all my information about where to run from and to from the state information. So all of that mechanism is fairly well defined and usable, and that's the way that it used to work. But now if we select this toggle box here, and we toggle the state and switch, so we're going from state 1 to state 2, you'll notice that as I toggle, it picks up the information about where it is automatically and starts the new transition from that location. So instead of ending the first effect, going from state A to state B, and popping it to the end to start the new transition, instead it actually stops it where it is, says, okay, where am I now, and then starts the new animation from that position. So this is called the autoReverse capability. And it's enabled by simply setting the value of the autoReverse property, it's a new property on transition, to true. In this case, we're picking up that property by data binding to the selected property of our checkbox. So down here we have a checkbox defined that says, do they want autoreversing? So we've given it a property name here. We didn't select it by default, but if you toggle it by simply selecting the checkbox, then the autoReverse property will be true, and we will automatically reverse on the fly for you. There are some important caveats here. It only works on transitions that are direct reverses of each other. So if it's going from state A to state B, and then a transition starts due to a state change that goes from state B to state A, then we will look at this property and say, okay, when we start state B, we should start from wherever wherever the animation currently is from the currently running transition. So that's one caveat. You couldn't be going from state A to state B and then go into a transition from state B to state C and have autoReverse do anything. We would simply drop that information. That's a different situation. The other caveat is you actually do need to define that reverse transition. Here we've defined it by just saying, well, there's a single transition. There's nothing different going on. It's just going to pick up its values automatically from states. But if you wanted to do something specific to move it from the first state to the second state, and then something else to move it from the second state to the first state, you would need to define those reverse transition effects independently, and then we will pick up whether they exist and do the correct thing on autoReverse. And the related thing for that situation is that you need to actually define the transitions such that they are true reverses of each other. They need to be for the same duration, or else you may not get the effect you were looking for. If one lasts for 2 seconds and the other lasts for only a second, well, we may not actually pop to the correct place on the reverse animation. So we're leaving a bunch of the work up to you. It is my sincere hope that we actually increase the capabilities of this property or add other properties to transition in the future to actually do more automatically for you, like maybe actually go ahead and create a reverse animation on the fly for you. But for now, as long as you have created and defined reversing animations for the transitions, then we'll go ahead and detect that, and using the autoReverse property, we'll go ahead and stop one on the fly and start the other from the same location. So for that simplified application, there didn't actually seem to be much interesting going on. And so you might wonder, well, is that actually a useful property? For more involved applications, it starts to look a little bit more reasonable. So here we have a situation where we're going to go from state to state, and we're going to move the buttons out of the way and fade this panel in. So this is sort of a choreographed animation where we have several things going on in sequence. And then if we toggle, we fade the thing out, we move the buttons back. And you can see by default, the transition behavior would be a little bit jarring. If we're popping from one to the other, we automatically pop the button positions out, we snap the opacity of the panel automatically, and it's just generally not the sort of smooth behavior that your user would probably want as they move from state to state. The whole point of transitions is to bring your users, to lead them from and to different states of the application. So if you're popping them instead of actually animating them, then maybe they're not actually getting what they came for, and they may not actually understand what's going on in the UI. So we can add autoReverse capability to this animation as well, simply by selecting the checkbox here. And that moves the buttons out of the way and will automatically determine on the fly where we are in the from and to reversing animations for the transitions, and it'll do the right thing in the UI. So no matter which part of that sequence animation we're in, we can go ahead and start the new animation from that same point in time. So in this case, we have a little bit more going on in the UI. We have these buttons declared with different positions in state 1 and state 2. We have the panel declared with different inclusion properties, so it's only going to exist in state 2, so it's going to automatically fade because that's the way we've defined our transition effects up above. And then we have the checkbox defined, which is going to toggle the auto-reversing capability. Up here we have 2 transitions defined. So in our previous application that we showed, we only had one transition defined, which was going to actually run both the forward and reverse. Here we want a more fully choreographed animation, so we're going to have a parallel defined that's going to move the first button, then it's going to move the second button with a start delay. So basically, as soon as the first button is out of the way, we'll move the second button, then we'll move the third button, and then we'll do a fade on the panel finally. And then the reverse animation is also defined where we do the fade of the panel first, so it fades out, and then we move the buttons appropriately back into place. And finally, we have the auto-reverse flag defined on both of these transitions, and it's defined to be the current value of that checkbox. So then we take a look at our application, and when the checkbox is selected, we're doing the right auto-reversing thing and getting the smooth behavior that helps the user understand exactly what's going on in the UI. If you want to see the code for this application and other related applications, check out my blog at graphics-geek.blogspot.com.